Hey class, we're on to chapter 11, Early Medieval Europe. You need to be reading the chapter in your book. It starts at 311, so you should have read the whole book up until 311 by now. And then we're going to be going over this chapter, which is pretty extensive. It goes from 311 all the way up to about 332. Nope, 334. Okay. So you want to read through that? Oh no, 330, 337. So it's a pretty long chapter, but not too much longer than the rest of them. We have a couple lectures over it, and I go over some of the highlights of the chapter and talk to you about, different parts of the culture, which we'll go over next. That's about that, and I hope you're doing well. If you need any help with anything, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm here for you, and I can be contacted in all the usual ways I've told you about. So take care. Okay, let's talk about the early and Middle Ages. My subtitle for this is The Age of Faith, because we'll see that a lot of the work in this time is made for religious reasons, and that people's faith and the church, and even in a certain part of this chapter, we'll look at Islam and their areas that they're in control of, their institutions, that those different institutions are the ones that commission a lot of work and have quite a bit of power in relationship to monarchies and things like that. Okay. In the West, we had the end of the Roman Empire. We're going to be talking, but before I say that, we're going to be talking about an era that's about 480 to 1480, a really long era of 1,000 years. Most of this early Middle Ages, though, is going to be within the 7th to the end of the 10th centuries, but technically the Middle Ages is about 1,000 years long. So it's not the same in the East and the West, but the end of the Roman Empire is in the West. There's a migration. It's what they call the Dark Ages. The flavor is very, very Christian in most of the places. And there's a big emphasis on monasticism, which is religious institutions that include things like hospitals, schools, hotels, farms, vineyards, grain silos. This is the monks, and they have abbeys and huge amounts of land. So the monastic life technically is people who are, you could think of it sometimes classically out in the wilderness, living a life of barely, fasting and prayer, and that's part of it. But there's other flavors of it that include people who are doing industry, like teaching the wealthy, their children being taught. They're having hospitals and helping the sick, brewing wine, and have farms and things. They also have places where people come and stay when they're on pilgrimages, and things like that. So a pilgrimage is a journey taken for a religious reason. And during this era, there's definitely a lot of pilgrimage to places that are important for people spiritually, like shrines and important sites, as well as to go see relics, which were really important during this era. A relic was something owned or touched by a holy person or saint. For example, a finger bone of the person or an item they owned. A lot of different things. And we'll look at a bunch of reliquaries that are the objects designed to hold the relic. Another really prominent part of this this chapter, especially in the later part of this era, is feudalism. So it's a system of loyalty, not social mobility. What do I mean by that? It's not a system of justice socially for people where there's like, oh, you can move up the ranks. If you're a serf, you're not very much able to ever go up. And it's very difficult. If you're a knight, you can maybe go up a little bit or down, but not really very much, okay? So this person, this king, is a lot of times they believe at this era a divine right, that they're given their job by God, and that it's inherited through being bloodline related most of the time. Sometimes it'll happen where someone will take power and there'll be some amount of civil war and things, but a lot of times we're talking about, bloodline relations in this part of the world. There's some amount of in different like Vikings and things where there's all about power is all about having a band of warriors and things, but primarily we're talking about the main and plain of it. And in this system, there's a way in which each level gives something to the level below and requires something from them. So the king gives fiefs, which is land, to his people, like the lords and bishops and things, and they're supposed to supply to him military aid. So money, and a lot of money, and knights and people to work for him and to conquer for him and to do his labor all over the world. Now those people, they give things to knights who are vassals to a lord. They give them maybe food, protection, and shelter, like a castle or a place to live, food, maybe protection and numbers. And in turn, the knights give to the people up here, this level of vassals to the king, they give them military service and homage to fight in their name and help protect their rights, their territory, and to fight for them, mostly a lot of that. And then in theory, the knights would have over have people that they're over, but a lot of times we could also say these people are over them. Everyone's over the layer below them, so the king is over everyone, and these people are all over the people below them, and these people are all over the people below them. In theory, the knights and lords are supposed to give protection to the peasants and give them a place to farm land and give them food and shelter. But that doesn't happen often as much as we would like. There's not a lot of social justice, so to speak. They give them land to farm, but in the end, they end up taking a lot of money from them to pay rent and requiring them to pay a lot of food up to them and things like that. So these people are having a really, really rough time of it in this type of society. It didn't have to be that way, so to speak, but people being corrupt and wanting more and more and more all the time made it like that. If people were caring above you, then your life would be better. If they weren't, then your life would be worse. And so when you had a good king, I'm sure the whole kingdom was a lot better. If you had a bad king, then everyone was having a terrible time of it. Same with anyone below a knight. If he was a good knight, then the life was probably great. If you had a bad master, then you're talking about a terrible life. So it's very, very, very mixed bag, shall we say. So in the West, and that was the West when we're talking about all this stuff, the migration. In the East, we have a different situation, right? Because there's still the Byzantine Empire happening, and there's this other thing happening too, which is from 700 to about 1100 AD, there was a rise of an Islamic empire, which you should know a lot about because of our last chapter, which talked all about this empire and a lot of the art that came out of it. So that would have been chapter 10. We don't need to go over that extensively anymore because obviously we already did. But we're going to continue on in this part of the world over here, outside of Constantinople and the Islamic Empire. We're going to look at different sites in Western Europe throughout this chapter, and it's going to be pretty interesting. A couple different, what do you call it? Groupings of peoples and also empires. One of them that will be one of the main ones we'll look at is the Carolingian Empire. And then we'll look at an Antonian Empire and then some stuff in really old time periods of Britain and things like the Saxons and things that are pretty interesting. So it's going to be a cool chapter. I like a lot of the work in this one. I like all the chapters for different reasons, but maybe I especially enjoy some of the old Saxon stuff, Viking-ish type of things, because they're interesting to me. Maybe because I'm part Viking or something. Anyway, so I look forward to going over this with you, and we're gonna have another second part to this chapter, this lecture in this chapter. So we're gonna want to watch that as well. All right, talk to you guys later.